Hi guys and welcome to America History Tales. Tonight we drift slowly toward a harbour that never really sleeps, where the air carries salt smoke and something faintly metallic, as if the city itself is already working before you even arrive. The ship beneath you creaks in a steady rhythm, wood shifting against water ropes, tightening and loosening with each small movement. You lean slightly against the rail, watching the shoreline grow clearer, its shapes rising through a thin, morning mist. This is New York in the early 1800s, not yet the towering giant you might imagine, but already restless, already crowded with intention. And yes, you probably would not survive this without a strong stomach, steady footing, and a willingness to share space with far more people than comfort allows. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share your location and the time where you are right now. There is something quietly comforting in knowing where everyone is listening from as we step into this story together. Now, dim the lights. The ship glides closer and the harbour begins to reveal itself not as a single scene, but as a layered presence. Masts rise like a forest of uneven lines, ships clustered together in a way that feels almost accidental, yet somehow organised by habit and necessity. Small boats weave between larger vessels, their occupants shouting brief instructions, voices carrying sharply across the water before dissolving into the general hum. A widely accepted historical understanding is that New York's harbour was already one of the busiest in the young United States by the early 19th century, acting as a central artery for trade, immigration and communication. You can feel that truth before you ever step onto land. The air itself seems to move with purpose, carrying scents that shift with each breath. Salt first, then tar, then something heavier, perhaps fish left too long in the sun, or refuse dressing along the edges of the docks. You take a slow breath anyway. There is no turning away from it. The ship slows, not abruptly, but with a gradual easing that you feel more than hear. The water changes its pattern around you, less open now, more confined, reflecting the closeness of other vessels and the wooden structures stretching out from shore. As you wait, you notice the people around you. Some stand quietly watching. Others gather their belongings with small, efficient movements, already preparing for what comes next. There is no shared conversation, only brief exchanges, practical and direct. A nod, a gesture, a reminder that whatever brought each of you here is not something easily explained in a single sentence. There is a lesser-known detail often mentioned in personal diaries of the time, that many newcomers first experienced New York not as a place of excitement but as a place of overwhelming sensory pressure. The combination of noise, smell and density created a kind of immediate fatigue even before the work of settling in had begun. You begin to understand that now. A voice calls out from the dock. Another answers. The words themselves are not fully clear, but the tone is unmistakable. Urgency without panic, routine without calm. This is how things are done here. You shift your weight slightly as the ship is guided into position. Ropes are thrown. Hands catch them. Wood meets wood with a dull, final sound that feels like a quiet announcement. You have arrived, and yet you hesitate just for a moment. Not because you doubt your decision, but because the city does not greet you in any familiar way. There is no gentle transition, no gradual introduction. It simply exists fully formed, already in motion, asking you to step into it without explanation. You move forward with the others. The plank beneath your feet feels less stable than you expect, a slight give with each step, reminding you that even now you are not quite on solid ground. Below, the water shifts, reflecting fragments of sky and shadow in uneven patterns. You reach the dock, and immediately the space around you tightens. People move in every direction, though not randomly. Each path seems to follow an invisible logic that you do not yet understand. Barrels are rolled past you, their wooden sides worn smooth from repeated use. Crates are stacked and restacked, marked with symbols and names that hint at distant places. A man brushes past your shoulder, not roughly but without acknowledgement. You turn slightly instinctively. He is already gone. This is how the city introduces itself. Not with welcome, but with momentum. There is a common observation among historians that early New York developed a culture of constant movement where standing still was often seen as a kind of inefficiency. You feel that expectation immediately. Even your pause, brief as it is, seems out of place. So you begin to walk. Not with confidence, not yet, but with a quiet willingness to follow the flow. The boards beneath you shift into packed earth, then into a surface that feels uneven and uncertain. The street ahead is not what you might expect. It is not clean nor clearly defined. Instead, it exists somewhere between path and process, shaped by use rather than design. Carts move slowly, pulled by horses whose breath rises in faint clouds. Their hooves press into the ground, leaving impressions that fill quickly with water and debris. You step carefully, adjusting your pace without fully realizing it. There is a curious anecdote sometimes mentioned in accounts from this period that even experienced travelers often underestimated how physically demanding it was simply to walk through New York streets. The combination of mud waste and uneven surfaces turned even short distances into small challenges. You feel that now with each step. A woman passes you carrying a basket, her posture steady despite the shifting ground. A child follows close behind their movements, quicker, more adaptable. They do not look at you, but they are aware of you. Everyone is. You notice the buildings. Next, they rise close together, their shapes irregular, their surfaces marked by time and use. Some lean slightly as if adjusting to the pressure of their neighbours. Windows open outward, revealing brief glimpses of interior life before closing again. The sounds change as you move further in, less open now, more layered. Voices overlap, wheels grind. Somewhere nearby a hammer strikes wood in a steady rhythm. The city does not produce a single sound, but a continuous arrangement of many. You pause again just for a moment, not because you want to stop, but because you need to take it in. Historians still argue whether people in this era felt excitement or unease more strongly when first encountering New York. The records suggest both, often at the same time woven together in ways that are difficult to separate. You feel that blend now. Curiosity, yes, but also a quiet awareness that nothing here will slow down for you. The air shifts again, carrying a new scent. Bread perhaps mixed with something sharper. Smoke from a nearby fire. The smell does not linger in a single place, but moves, changing as you move. You take another step, then another. And slowly, almost without noticing, your pace begins to match the city's. Not perfectly, not yet, but enough that you are no longer standing apart from it. You are within it now. The harbour behind you continues its work, unseen but present. The streets ahead stretch further than you can fully grasp, each turn leading to something not yet familiar. And as you move forward, you begin to understand that this is not simply a place you have arrived in. It is a place that will shape how you move, how you think, and how you exist, whether you intend it or not. You continue forward, though. Now the harbour is already fading behind you, replaced by something denser, closer, more demanding of your attention. The ground beneath your feet feels heavier, here softer in places, as if the street itself has absorbed everything that has passed over it. Each step asks for care, not hesitation but awareness. Your boot presses down, it sinks slightly, not enough to trap you but enough to remind you that nothing here is entirely stable. The street stretches ahead in uneven lines, shaped more by habit than by any clear plan. There are no neat edges guiding your path. Instead, movement organizes itself through repetition. People follow where others have walked, carts carve shallow tracks into the earth, and water gathers wherever it is allowed to settle. A well-established historical fact is that many streets in early 19th century New York were unpaved, especially outside the most prominent areas. Dirt, mud, refuse and runoff combined into a shifting surface that changed with weather and use. You feel that truth immediately as you adjust your pace, learning, without instruction, where to step and where not to. A cart approaches from your left, you hear it before you fully see it. The slow grind of wooden wheels, the steady pull of a horse moving with quiet endurance. The driver does not call out loudly, but there is an expectation that you will make space. You step aside, feeling the edge of the street give way slightly beneath your weight. The cart passes close enough that you can smell it. Hay, damp wood, and something sharper beneath it. Perhaps waste. Perhaps the residue of whatever it carried before. You take a small breath through your nose, then release it slowly. This is normal here. Nothing is hidden. You move back into the flow. Around you, people carry what they can, and bundles wrapped in cloth, baskets filled with goods, tools worn smooth from repeated use. No one carries anything unnecessary. Every object has purpose, and every movement seems tied to that purpose. There is a quiet rhythm to it, not calm but steady. A man ahead of you slips slightly, his foot losing its grip on a patch of wetter ground. He catches himself quickly adjusting without pause, continuing forward as if nothing happened. No one reacts. Not because they do not notice, but because this is expected. There is an often overlooked detail in descriptions of early city life that people developed a kind of instinctive balance, a way of moving through difficult terrain without conscious thought. You begin to sense that this is something learned through repetition rather than instruction. Your own steps grow more careful, not slower, just more deliberate. To your right, a row of small shops presses close together. Their entrances open directly onto the street with little separation between commerce and movement. A butcher stands near his doorway, sleeves rolled, his hands marked by his work. Cuts of meat hang behind him, exposed to the air, their presence both practical and slightly unsettling. The smell reaches you before you look directly, rich, heavy, immediate. You do not linger. Further along, another shop offers something lighter. Bread stacked in uneven rows, its surface browned and cracked. The scent is softer, warmer, cutting briefly through the heavier smells of the street. You notice how quickly your senses shift, how they adjust, how they accept. A woman stands near the edge of the shop, exchanging a few coins for a loaf. The transaction is quick, efficient, without ceremony. She turns, already focused on what comes next. There is no pause here. For appreciation, only continuation. A narrow space opens between buildings, revealing a glimpse of something behind them. Not a courtyard exactly, but a shared area where barrels are stored, where water collects, where tasks that do not belong on the main street are carried out. You catch only a moment of it before your view is blocked again by passing figures. The city does not reveal everything at once. It offers fragments. It offers fragments. You hear voices rise and fall around you. Some sharp, some low. Languages overlap, accents, shifting tones carrying different rhythms. You do not understand every word, but you understand the intent. Negotiation, instruction, disagreement, routine. There is a curious tidbit recorded in accounts from this period that travellers often remarked on how loud New York felt compared to smaller towns, even when no single voice was raised. The density of sound itself created a constant presence, a kind of background that never fully disappeared. You begin to notice that now. Not as noise exactly, but as texture, something that fills the space between your thoughts. A dog moves past you, quick and alert, weaving between legs with practiced ease. It pauses briefly near a pile of refuse, sniffing, then continues on. No one calls it, no one claims it. It belongs to the street as much as anyone else. You step over a shallow channel where water moves slowly, carrying with it small fragments of whatever it encounters. The surface reflects light in uneven patterns, broken by movement, by debris, by the shifting ground beneath it. The air feels thicker here, not difficult to breathe, but present. You become aware of your own breathing in a way that you were not before. In, out, dead. You pass another cart, this one loaded with crates marked by symbols you do not immediately recognize. Trade moves through this city, constantly connecting it to places far beyond what you can see. The goods themselves are ordinary in form, but their origin carries a kind of quiet significance. Historians still debate whether New York's rapid growth in this period was driven more by its geographic advantages or by the ambitions of the people who passed through it. As you walk, it feels impossible to separate the two. The place and the people seem to shape each other in equal measure. A child runs past you, their steps light despite the uneven ground. They move with a confidence that surprises you, navigating obstacles without hesitation. You watch them for a moment, then continue on. You begin to feel it now. Not comfort, but adaptation. Your steps find more stable paths. Your eyes scan the ground ahead without conscious effort. You shift slightly to avoid contact before it happens. The city does not slow, but you begin to move with it. The buildings press closer as the street narrows slightly. The light changes, filtered now through the structures above, creating patterns that shift as you move. Shadows stretch and contract, never fully still. You hear laughter somewhere behind you. Brief, sharp, then gone. Moments appear and disappear quickly here. Ooh, nothing lingers unless it must. You adjust your coat slightly, feeling the fabric settle against your shoulders. The movement is small, almost automatic, yet it grounds you for a moment. A reminder that you are still yourself within all of this motion. You look ahead. The street continues, not in a straight line, but with subtle turns, slight changes that reveal new details as you follow them. There is no clear destination yet, only direction. And as you take another step, then another, you begin to understand something quiet but important. This city is not something you observe from a distance. It is something you learn by moving through it. You move deeper into the city and gradually, almost without noticing, the urgency of the street begins to shift into something more contained. The flow of carts and open trade thins, slightly replaced by the narrower passages and buildings that seem to lean closer together, as if sharing space out of necessity rather than choice. The ground feels firmer, here though still uneven, less churned by heavy wheels, more shaped by footsteps. Your pace adjusts again, not because you decide to slow down, but because the space around you asked for it. You begin to notice signs, not written clearly in a way that guides you, but implied through small details. Doors that open and close frequently, windows that remain partly ajar, the faint repetition of voices that seem to belong not to passing exchange, but to shared living. This is where people stay, or at least where they try to. A widely accepted historical fact is that boarding houses were one of the most common forms of accommodation in early 19th century New York. For many newcomers, they offered a temporary solution that often became long-term spaces where privacy was limited and routine was shared among strangers. You approach one without fully intending to. Its entrance is narrow, set slightly back from the street as if it does not wish to draw attention yet cannot avoid it. The door stands open just enough to suggest invitation, though not warmth. You pause at the threshold. Inside, the light changes immediately. Softer, dimmer. The sounds of the street do not disappear, but they lose their sharp edges, becoming something more distant, more contained. You step in. The floor beneath you creaks, a subtle protest with each shift of weight. The air is warmer here, but heavier, holding on to scents that do not move as freely as outside. Wood, fabric, cooked food, something faintly damp. A narrow hallway stretches ahead its walls marked by use. Not damage exactly, but the accumulation of contact over time. Hands brushing past, shoulders turning sideways to make space. A figure appears briefly at the far end. They glance toward you, not with curiosity, but with acknowledgement. Then they disappear into another room, the door closing softly behind them. There is a peculiar detail noted in some personal accounts that boarding houses often operated on an unspoken understanding of limited interaction. People shared space meals and routines, yet maintained a quiet distance as if preserving a small part of themselves that the city could not fully claim. You feel that here. Not isolation, but restraint. A woman emerges from a doorway to your left, carrying a folded cloth. She pauses when she sees you, not startled, but measuring. Her expression is neutral, practiced. She gives a small nod, then continues past you without a word. You return the nod instinctively. This is enough. You move further inside, drawn not by curiosity, but by the quiet pull of understanding how such a place functions. The hallway opens slightly into a shared room. Not large, but sufficient. A table stands at the centre, its surface worn smooth. A few chairs surround it, none matching exactly, each showing signs of repair or adaptation. A pot rests near the hearth, its contents not immediately visible, though the scent suggests something simple. Broth, perhaps, or vegetables cooked until they begin to soften into one another. You hear voices from above, muted, layered. Footsteps follow the ceiling, carrying their movement in a way that feels almost personal. Every action in this house, seems to echo slightly, not loudly, but enough that nothing is entirely private. Historians still argue whether boarding houses created a sense of community or simply forced proximity among individuals who would otherwise remain strangers. As you stand here, it feels like both are true at once. The space connects people, yet does not necessarily bring them closer. You rest your hand lightly against the back of one of the chairs. The wood is smooth worn by repeated use. You imagine how many people have done the same, pausing, briefly grounding themselves before continuing with whatever the day requires. A door opens somewhere behind you. You turn slightly. A man steps in carrying a small bundle. He removes his hat, brushing off a trace of dust or moisture, then glances around the room. His eyes pass over you without stopping, not dismissive, simply efficient. He sets his bundle down near the wall, then moves toward the table. There is no greeting, no introduction, just presence. He realizes that names may not matter much here. Not immediately. What matters is behavior, consistency, the ability to exist within the shared rhythm without disrupting it. A narrow staircase rises along the side of the room, its steps steep, its railing polished by countless hands. You place your foot on the first step, testing its stability. It holds, though, with a faint sound that suggests age rather than weakness. You climb slowly. Each step brings a slight shift in the air. Warmer above, more enclosed. The light grows thinner, filtered through smaller windows, through spaces that do not fully open. At the top, a corridor stretches in both directions. Doors line the walls, each one closed, or nearly closed. You pass one where the door stands just slightly ajar. Inside you glimpse a narrow bed, a small trunk, a single chair. The space is modest, defined by necessity rather than comfort. There is a lesser-known anecdote from the period that some boarding house residents would rotate sleeping arrangements based on work schedules, sharing beds in shifts rather than simultaneously. The idea feels strange at first, yet in a city where space is limited, such arrangements become understandable. You move on. Another door opens briefly as you pass. A woman steps out carrying a small basin. She nods to you, her expression tired but steady, then disappears down the stairs without pause. You notice how everyone moves with purpose. Even in rest, there is an awareness of what comes next. You reach the end of the corridor and pause near a window. It is small, its glass uneven, distorting the view beyond. You look out. The street is still there, still moving though. From this height it feels slightly removed. The sounds reach you differently now. Softer. Blended. For a moment you feel something close to stillness. Not complete, but enough. You rest your hand against the window frame, feeling the faint coolness of the wood. The city continues outside, unchanged by your presence within this quieter space. And yet you understand something new. Living here is not about escaping escaping the city. It's about finding small pockets within it, where you can pause even briefly before stepping back into its constant motion. You turn away from the window. The corridor remains the same. The doors remain closed, but now they feel less like barriers and more like boundaries that make the shared space possible. You take a slow breath, then begin to move again. You step back out into the street, leaving behind the contained warmth of the boarding house, and the city meets you again without hesitation. The air feels sharper now, more active, as if everything here is in the middle of becoming something else. You adjust your footing instinctively, returning to that careful rhythm you have begun to learn. The street widens slightly ahead, not in a grand way, but enough to allow more movement, more exchange. You notice it first through sound. Voices gather here in thicker layers, not louder exactly, but more varied. Calls, negotiations, brief laughter, and the occasional sharp disagreement that rises quickly and fades just as fast. You follow the current of people toward it, and then you see the market. It is not a single organized space, but a collection of activity that has settled into a familiar pattern. Stalls line the edges of the street, some little more than wooden tables, others built into the front of buildings. Goods are displayed openly without much attempt to separate them from the environment around them. Food is everywhere. You smell it before you fully take it in. Fresh bread still warm, its scent soft and inviting. Fish laid out in rows, their sharp, salty presence cutting through the air. Meat hanging from hooks, darker, heavier, reminding you of how quickly things must be sold before they turn. An established reality of the time is that New York's food supply relied heavily on daily markets like this, where freshness was not a luxury but a necessity. Without modern preservation, timing mattered as much as money. You begin to understand that here food is not simply chosen, it is secured. You move closer. A vendor calls out their voice steady practiced. They do not shout wildly but project just enough to reach those nearby. Their hands move as they speak, gesturing toward what they offer, inviting attention without demanding it. You pause near a table stacked with loaves. Their surfaces are uneven, some darker than others, their shapes slightly irregular. Nothing here feels standardized. Each piece reflects the conditions in which it was made, the grain, the oven, the timing. You reach out slightly, not touching, but close enough to feel the faint warmth still lingering. A woman steps beside you, placing coins onto the table with a quiet certainty. The exchange is immediate. No bargaining, no hesitation. She takes her bread and moves on, already turning her attention to something else. There is no lingering here, no browsing in the way you might expect. A curious observation from the period is that many buyers developed relationships with specific vendors, returning to the same place not out of loyalty alone, but because trust in quality could mean the difference between nourishment and disappointment. You begin to sense that familiarity matters more than choice. You continue along the line of stalls. A butcher works with practiced precision, separating cuts with movements that are both efficient and controlled. There is no wasted motion. Each action leads directly to the next. You notice how people approach not with questions but with decisions already made. They know what they need, or at least what they can afford. You hear a brief exchange nearby. Not words you fully catch, but tone that suggests negotiation. A slight tension, then release. Coins change hands. The moment ends. You move on. Further ahead, a man tends to barrels filled with produce. Apples, perhaps, though some are bruised, their surfaces marked by time and travel. He turns one over in his hand, examining it briefly before setting it aside. There is an unspoken understanding here that perfection is not expected, only usefulness. You step carefully around a patch of ground where water has gathered, reflecting fragments of sky and movement. A child crouches nearby, watching something in the water with quiet focus. Their stillness stands out against the constant motion around them. For a moment you slow, not because you must, but because something about that pause feels significant. Then the movement of the market draws you forward again. You notice now how your senses have adjusted. The smells no longer strike you all at once, but layer themselves in a way you can separate. Bread, poussière, fish, earth, each one distinct yet part of a larger whole. There is a small stall ahead where something different is happening. Not food exactly, but drink. A man pours liquid from a container into simple cups, handing them to those who approach. The scent is faintly sweet, perhaps cider, perhaps something stronger. You watch as one person drinks quickly, then moves on, the pause lasting only seconds. You consider it, then decide against it. Not out of caution, but because you're still learning how to move here. And even a small pause feels like it carries weight. Scholars continue to discuss whether access to consistent, safe food in early New York improved steadily during this period or remained uneven across different neighborhoods. As you stand within this market, it feels clear that availability does not guarantee ease. Everything here depends on timing, on knowledge, on small advantages that are not always visible. You pass a woman selling small bundles of herbs, their scent lighter, almost refreshing against the heavier air. She arranges them carefully, though not delicately, ensuring they are visible, reachable. You notice how each vendor claims their space without boundaries. No lines, no clear divisions, just an understanding of where one presence ends and another begins. A cart pushes through slowly, its driver guiding it with subtle movements rather than force. People shift around it, adjusting without frustration. The space reorganizes itself in real time, then settles again. You realize now that this is not chaos. It is a kind of order that does not rely on structure. It exists through repetition, through shared understanding. You step aside briefly, allowing a group to pass. Their conversation flows around you quick, familiar. Their attention focused on something you are not part of. You do not feel excluded. Just separate. For now, you look once more across the market. The movement, the exchange, the quiet urgency that underlies everything. and you understand something that was not clear before. Food here is not simply part of life. It is one of the ways the city holds itself together. Without it, the rhythm would break. Without it, the movement would falter. You take a slow breath. The air is still full, still layered, but now it feels less overwhelming, more readable. You adjust your step again, moving forward, letting the market fall gradually behind you as the street begins to shift once more into something new. You leave the market behind, though. Its presence lingers in your senses, and the street begins to change once more. The stalls thin out. The smell of food fades slightly, replaced by something sharper, more focused. Wood shavings, metal, smoke that carries a different intention. Work. You feel it before you fully see it. The rhythm of the city shifts here, becoming more direct, more purposeful. Movement is no longer about exchange alone, but about production. Things are made here, repaired, counted, lifted, recorded. You follow the sound of steady impact, a hammer striking wood, again and again, each strike spaced with precision, not rushed, not hesitant. You turn slightly and see a workshop open to the street, its interior visible in fragments. A man stands at a bench, his hands moving with practiced certainty, shaping something you cannot fully identify, yet understand as necessary. An established fact about this period is that New York's economy depended heavily on skilled and semi-skilled labor carried out in small workshops like this, rather than large centralized factories. Production was close to the street, visible, audible, and deeply connected to daily life. You pause just long enough to observe, not interrupting, not lingering. The man does not look up. He does not need to. Your presence does not change his task. You move on. Further along the street opens slightly again, revealing a different kind of activity. Not crafting, but coordination. A counting house stands with its door-wide clerks moving in and out with papers in hand. Their clothing is cleaner, their movements less physical, but no less precise. You watch one man step aside, reviewing a document briefly before folding it and continuing on. His pace is steady, neither hurried nor relaxed. There is a different kind of pressure here. Less visible, but no less real. You begin to notice how work in the city is not separated into clear categories. It overlaps. The sound of tools blends with the scratch of quills. The movement of goods connects directly to the movement of information. Everything feeds into everything else. A lesser-known detail from this time is that many workers did not have fixed hours in the modern sense. Instead, their days were shaped by demand daylight and necessity, often stretching far longer than expected. You sense that here in the way, no one seems to pause fully, even when they are not actively moving. You continue walking. A group of labourers passes you, their clothing marked by dust and effort. They speak briefly among themselves, their tone light for a moment, then quiet again as they separate, each turning towards a different task. There is no ceremony in their departure, only continuation. You step around a stack of timber set near the edge of the street. The wood is rough, freshly cut, its scent strong and clean compared to the heavier smells you have grown used to. You run your hand lightly along its surface as you pass, feeling the texture catch slightly against your skin. It grounds you. Just for a moment, you hear a different sound now. Water, not from the harbour, but from something contained. You follow it with your eyes and see a small pump set near the side of a building. A woman stands beside it, working the handle with steady effort, filling a bucket that rests at her feet. The motion is repetitive. Up, down, each movement controlled, efficient. Water spills slightly as the bucket fills, darkening the ground beneath it. She does not seem to mind. She lifts the bucket once it is full, adjusting her grip before carrying it away with quiet determination. There is a practical truth often noted in accounts of early urban life that even basic resources like water required effort to obtain, especially before widespread infrastructure was established. You see that clearly now. Nothing arrives without labour. You continue forward. The street narrows again, but the sense of work does not lessen. If anything, it becomes more concentrated. You pass a tailor's shop, its interior filled with fabric thread and careful movement. A figure sits near the window, stitching with steady hands, their attention fixed entirely on the task. You slow slightly as you pass. The precision draws your foot, each stitch small, deliberate, a reminder that not all labour is loud. Some of it is quiet, almost invisible, yet no less essential. Scholars still debate whether life in early New York offered opportunity or simply replaced one form of hardship with another. As you move through these streets, the answer feels less like a choice and more like a balance. Effort and possibility existing side by side, neither fully overcoming the other. You step aside as another cart moves through this one loaded with barrels that shift slightly with each turn of the wheel. The driver keeps a steady hand guiding it through the narrow space with practiced ease. You notice how your own movements have changed. You no longer hesitate as much. You anticipate. You adjust before you need to. The city is beginning to teach you, not through instruction, but through repetition. You pass a doorway where voices rise in brief discussion. Inside, men stand around a table, their gestures sharp, their expressions focused. Numbers perhaps, agreements, decisions that will shape movements you cannot yet see. You do not linger. Some spaces are not meant for observation. You move on. The light shifts again as clouds pass overhead, softening the edges of everything around you. For a moment, the street feels less intense, as if taking a brief breath. But the work does not stop. It continues at the same pace, the same rhythm, unaffected by the change. You take a slow breath of your own. In, out. You feel it now. Not exhaustion, but awareness. A recognition that this city does not separate life from labour. They are the same here. Each step you take is part of it. Each movement connects to something beyond itself. You look ahead. The street continues, carrying with it the same steady insistence. And you follow. You continue along the street, and slowly, almost without warning, the texture of the city begins to shift again. The sounds remain, the movement never truly fades, but something about the atmosphere feels lighter here. Less burdened by necessity, more shaped by display. The street opens wider. Not dramatically, but enough that you feel the difference in how people move. Steps become less hurried. Shoulders relax slightly. Conversations stretch a little longer before ending. You have reached Broadway. It does not announce itself with a clear boundary. There is no gate, no marker that tells you this is something different. Yet the change is unmistakable. The buildings stand a little taller, their fronts more deliberate, their windows cleaner, more reflective. An established historical observation is that Broadway began to emerge in the early 19th century as one of New York's most prominent streets, a place where commerce, leisure, and social life intersected. You see that intersection now, not as a single event, but as a continuous presence. You slow your pace, not because you must, but because others do. People walk here not only to reach a destination, but to be seen moving toward it. Their clothing is more varied, more intentional. Fabrics appear cleaner, better kept. Colours stand out where before everything felt muted by use. A man passes you in a well-fitted coat, his posture upright, his gaze forward. He does not look at those around him, yet his presence invites attention. You notice how others glance briefly, then look away as if acknowledging without intruding. You begin to understand. This street is not only about movement, it is about presence. You walk along the edge, observing. Shops line the street with greater care than those you passed earlier. Their goods are arranged with intention, displayed in ways that invite the eye rather than simply serve necessity. Glass windows reflect light unevenly, offering glimpses of what lies inside. You pause briefly before one. Inside, fabrics hang in neat rows, their surfaces smooth, their colours deeper than what you have seen elsewhere. A figure stands within, adjusting a display, ensuring each piece falls just so. There is a quiet pride in the arrangement, a desire not only to sell but to present. A lesser-known detail from this period is that window displays began to play an increasing role in attracting customers even before modern advertising took shape. The idea of drawing attention through visual appeal was already forming, shaping how people interacted with goods. You move on. A group gathers ahead, not blocking the street but creating a small centre of attention. You approach, carefully drawn by curiosity. At the centre stands a performer speaking with animated gestures, their voice carrying clearly despite the surrounding noise. You cannot catch every word, but the rhythm is engaging, rising and falling in a way that holds attention. A few coins change hands. The performer nods slightly, continuing without pause. Entertainment, you realize, does not wait for formal spaces. It happens where people are. You step back, allowing others to move closer. The flow continues around you. A carriage passes slowly, its wheels smoother than those of the carts you saw earlier. The horses move with a controlled grace, their pace measured, their presence drawing subtle attention. Those nearby shift slightly to make space, not with urgency, but with quiet acknowledgement. You notice how different this feels from the streets behind you. There is still movement, still work, but here there is also performance. A quiet, constant awareness of how one appears to others. You adjust your coat slightly, smoothing it without thinking. The gesture feels small, yet meaningful. You pass a cafe-like establishment, its door open, revealing a dim interior where a few figures sit at small tables. Their posture is relaxed, their conversation slower, more reflective. Cups rest in their hands, steam rising faintly. You hesitate, just for a moment. The idea of sitting, of pausing fully feels unfamiliar after everything you have experienced so far. You do not enter. Not yet. Scholars continue to examine whether spaces like these represented true leisure for the broader population or remained limited to those with time and means to spare. As you stand outside, it feels like both possibilities exist, overlapping but not fully shared. You continue walking. The street stretches to head its surface slightly more, even though still marked by use. The light reflects differently here, catching on windows, on polished surfaces, on small details that might go unnoticed elsewhere. You begin to hear music, faint at first, then clearer. A melody carried from somewhere ahead, perhaps a small hall or gathering space. The notes rise above the general sound of the street, not overpowering it, but adding another layer. You follow to it briefly, then let it fade as your path continues forward. There is a curious remark found in some accounts of early Broadway that people often came here not because they had something specific to do, but because being present here made them feel connected to the city's growth and possibility. You begin to understand that feeling now. Not fully, but enough. You are still an observer, still learning, yet for a moment as you walk among these shifting displays of commerce and presence, you feel slightly less separate from it all. The city does not pause, but it allows moments like this, where movement feels lighter, where effort is less visible, where the surface of things carries its own kind of meaning. You take a slow breath. The air feels different here, less heavy, more open. You look ahead. Broadway continues stretching into distance, carrying with it the promise of more change, more variation. And you follow your steps steady, your awareness growing with each moment. You drift away from the brighter stretch of Broadway, and the change arrives gradually, almost politely at first. The buildings begin to press closer again. The light softens not because the sun has shifted, but because the streets narrow and the space between walls tightens. Your steps slow without instruction. The ground beneath you feels familiar again, less even, slightly damp in places. The careful rhythm you learned earlier returns, settling back into your body as if it had only been resting. The voices change too, not fewer, but closer, more direct, less shaped by performance. You turn into a street that feels different the moment you enter it. Not dangerous in any immediate sense, but heavier. The air carries a mix of scents that do not separate as easily as before. Smoke, food, damp, wood, and something else that lingers without a clear source. You have reached the edges of 5 Points. It does not announce itself with a sign or boundary. It reveals itself through density, through the way space is used more completely, more urgently. Buildings rise unevenly, some leaning slightly, their surfaces marked by time and strain. A commonly accepted description of this district in the early 19th century is that it became one of the most overcrowded neighborhoods in New York, shaped by rapid growth, limited infrastructure, and waves of newcomers seeking any available shelter. You see that condition not as a statistic, but as a lived reality. Windows stand open, not always by choice, but because the air inside needs to move. Voices spill out into the street, blending with those already present. You catch fragments of conversation, laughter, argument, thinned, song, all of it layered, all of it immediate. You move carefully, not because you are afraid, but because the space asks for awareness. A group stands near the corner ahead, their posture relaxed, their attention focused on each other rather than the street. One of them glances toward you briefly, then returns to the conversation. The exchange is quick, almost routine. You continue on. A narrow alley opens to your left, revealing a glimpse of life compressed into a smaller space. Laundry hangs between buildings, fabric shifting slightly with the movement of air. A child runs through their steps quick, their laughter cutting briefly through the heavier atmosphere. You pause for a moment, watching. There is energy here. Not polished, not contained, but real. An unusual detail noted in some accounts is that music and dance were common in neighborhoods like this even under difficult conditions. Fiddles, simple drums, voices raised in song. Not as performance for an audience, but as part of daily life, a way to shape the time between work and rest. You hear it now. Faint, a rhythm carried from somewhere deeper within the block. You follow the sound with your attention, though not with your steps. It rises, then fades, then rises again, never fully disappearing. You continue forward. A doorway stands open ahead, revealing a room filled with movement. Figures pass in and out, their actions quick, purposeful. The interior is dim but active. You catch a glimpse of a table of hands moving across it, of something being shared or exchanged. You do not step inside. You understand that not every space is meant for you. You move on. The street bends slightly, and with it the light shifts again. Shadows deepen in certain places, while others remain unexpectedly bright. The contrast feels sharper here, less gradual. You notice the ground more carefully now. Where to step, where to avoid. Small details become more important. A broken surface, a patch of standing water, a loose board near the edge of a building. Your body adjusts without needing to think. You are learning. There is a thoughtful observation often raised by historians that areas like 5 Points were described very differently depending on who was doing the describing. Some accounts emphasized danger and disorder, while others revealed strong community ties and shared resilience. As you move through this space, it becomes clear that neither view alone is complete. You see hardship, but you also see adaptation. A woman sits near a doorway, mending a piece of clothing with steady hands. Her focus is complete. Her movements calm despite everything around her. A man nearby repairs a small object, his attention equally fixed. Life continues here, not in spite of the conditions, but within them. You hear raised voices suddenly, not far ahead, sharp, brief. You slow slightly, not stopping but becoming more aware. The tension rises, then breaks just as quickly. The voice is lower, the movement resumes, nothing lingers long enough to fully settle. Moments here are intense, but fleeting. You pass a group of children playing near the edge of the street. Their game is simple, improvised, shaped by whatever space is available. They move with ease, their awareness of the environment instinctive. They belong here in a way you do not, at least not yet. You continue on your step, steady, your senses engaged. The city feels different here, closer, more immediate, less filtered. You notice how your breathing has changed again. Not strained, but attentive. Each breath carrying more information, more texture. You look ahead. The street continues, though it feels less predictable now. Each turn reveals something new, something not fully shaped by expectation. And yet you do not feel lost. You feel present, fully within the movement of the place. You take another step, then another, and as you move through this layered, complicated space, you begin to understand that the city is not a single experience. It is many, existing at once, waiting to be felt. You move on from the crowded streets, though the feeling of closeness lingers, and the city reveals another layer of itself, one that is less visible at first glance, yet impossible to ignore once you notice it. The air changes again, not sharply, but gradually. There is a weight to it now. Something faintly sour, something that does not pass as quickly as the other smells you have encountered. You take a slow breath and realize that this part of the city does not move its air as easily. You notice the ground first. A narrow channel runs along the side of the street carrying water that does not look entirely clear. It moves slowly, not with purpose, but because it has nowhere else to go. Small fragments drift within it, catching briefly on edges before continuing on. You step carefully over it. The boards placed across it are worn, their surfaces smoothed by countless crossings. They hold but just enough. A well-documented reality of early 19th century New York is that sanitation systems were limited and inconsistent. Waste disposal often relied on open drains, privies, and informal practices that left much of the city exposed to contamination. You feel the presence of that system or lack of it with every step. A man stands near a pump ahead, working it with steady effort. The handle rises and falls, drawing water up from below. A small line forms behind him, each person waiting with a container, their patience shaped by necessity. You approach slowly, observing. The water that emerges looks clear at first, clean enough, yet you hesitate. There is something about the way it smells, faint but present, that gives you pause. A quiet but telling detail from the period is that many residents could not be certain of the quality of the water they consumed. Wells were often located near waste areas, and contamination was not always visible. The risk was understood, though not always avoidable. You watch as a woman fills her bucket, then lifts it with practiced ease. She does not question it. She cannot afford to. You step aside, allowing others to move forward. Your attention shifts upward. Windows open slightly above you, and from them small actions take place. A cloth shaken out, a basin emptied. Water poured down, falling in a narrow stream that disappears into the street below. You instinctively step back. The city teaches you quickly where not to stand. You continue walking. The smell grows stronger in certain places, then fades in others. It does not remain constant. Instead, it shifts with the flow of the street, with the arrangement of buildings, with the unseen movement of air. You begin to understand that this is not a single condition. It's many small ones overlapping. You pass a row of privies set behind a building, their doors closed, their presence marked more by scent than by sight. You do not linger. No one does. Yet their role in the daily functioning of the city is undeniable. There is a thoughtful observation often discussed by scholars that urban growth in this period frequently outpaced the development of infrastructure, creating conditions where innovation and risk existed side by side. As you move through this space, you feel the imbalance clearly. The city expands, but not everything expands with it. You step around another patch of standing water, this one darker, its surface broken by small ripples as something unseen moves beneath it. You do not look too closely. Instead, you focus on your path. Forward. Steady. A cart passes nearby, its wheels cutting through the softer ground, leaving tracks that fill slowly behind it. The driver does not react to the conditions. He moves as if this is simply how things are, because it is. You hear coughing from somewhere behind you, not loud, but persistent. It blends into the general sound of the street, yet once you notice it, you cannot fully ignore it. You walk on. A building ahead stands slightly apart from the others. Its doorway open, its interior dim. A small sign hangs beside it, though. The words are not immediately clear. A figure sits near the entrance, their posture still, their expression unreadable. You glance briefly, then continue. There are spaces here that hold stories you do not yet understand. You feel the air shift again as you turn a corner. A slight breeze moves through, carrying with it a cleaner scent, though it doesn't last long. The relief is brief but noticeable. You take a deeper breath, then release it slowly. There is a lesser-known note in some accounts that people living in cities like New York developed a kind of sensory adaptation, learning to filter out certain smells and sounds over time. What once felt overwhelming became part of the background, no longer demanding constant attention. You begin to sense that change within yourself, not complete, but beginning. You notice how your focus shifts more easily. Now, how you can choose where to direct your attention rather than being pulled in every direction at once. The city is not becoming easier. You are becoming more accustomed to it. You pass another pump, this one less crowded, its handle resting still. A small puddle forms beneath it, reflecting a distorted image of the building beside it. You pause, briefly looking at the reflection, watching how it moves with the slightest disturbance. Then you step away. The street continues. Always. You look ahead, your step steady, your awareness settled into a quiet rhythm. And as you move through this part of the city where water waste and air intertwine in ways that are not always visible, you understand something essential. Life here is not only about what you see, it is about what you learn to live with. You continue forward and gradually the street begins to shift once more, not through sudden change, but through subtle differences that gather meaning the longer you move. The voices around you carry new rhythms. The cadence of speech changes slightly. Words shaped by accents that feel unfamiliar yet steady. You notice it first in passing, a phrase spoken quickly, another answered in a tone you cannot fully place. You do not understand everything, but you understand enough to recognize that the city is not made from a single voice. It is many, layered together. You turn into a street where the buildings look similar to those you've already seen, yet the life within them feels distinct. Doors open more frequently. Windows remain active, revealing glimpses of interior spaces filled with movement. A recognized reality of early 19th century New York is that immigration played a central role in shaping the city's growth, with people arriving from Ireland, Germany, and other parts of Europe bringing with them languages, customs, and expectations that blended and sometimes clashed. You see that blending now, not as a concept, but as lived experience. A woman speaks to a child in a language you do not fully recognize, her tone gentle but firm. The child responds quickly, their voice lighter, more fluid. The exchange feels complete even if the words are not clear to you. You continue walking. A small shop stands ahead, its entrance, open, its interior filled with goods that seem slightly different from what you have seen before. The arrangement is similar, yet the details shift. The way items are stacked, the types of objects displayed. You pause briefly at the threshold. A man inside looks up, his expression neutral, then gives a small nod. It is not an invitation, but not a dismissal either. You step in. The air inside feels warmer, carrying scents that are unfamiliar yet not unpleasant. Spices, perhaps. Something dried. Something preserved. A lesser-known detail often mentioned in accounts of immigrant neighborhoods is that food traditions were among the first and most enduring ways communities maintained their identity. Ingredients that were available were adapted into familiar forms, creating something both new and recognizable. You observe quietly. A woman stands near the back, preparing something with careful attention. Her movements are steady, practiced, each action following the last without hesitation. You do not interrupt. You do not need to. You step back out into the street. The sounds return immediately, but now they carry new layers. Different words, different tones. You begin to notice how these variations do not separate the city but weave through it. A group of men stands nearby, engaged in conversation that rises and falls with energy. Their gestures are expressive, their voices animated. You catch only fragments, but the emotion is clear. Agreement, disagreement, familiarity. You move past them. The street continues. A cart loaded with goods moves slowly ahead, its contents covered, but marked with symbols that suggest distant origins. Trade connects these communities not only to each other, but to places far beyond the city itself. You realize that what you are seeing is not static. It is changing, constantly. There is an interesting observation raised by historians that immigrant communities in New York often form tight networks for support, yet also face significant challenges in integration, leading to both cooperation and tension within the broader city. As you move through this space, you sense both possibilities at once. You pass a building where music spills out into the street, different from what you heard earlier. The rhythm is unfamiliar, yet compelling. A few people pause near the doorway, listening briefly before continuing on. You do the same, just for a moment, then you move on. A child runs past you, their laughter quick and bright. Another follows, calling out in a language you do not fully understand, yet the meaning is clear. Play, pursuit, energy that does not depend on words. You smile slightly, then continue. You notice now how your own awareness has expanded. You no longer focus only on what you recognize. You begin to accept what you do not understand as part of the experience, rather than something to resolve. The city teaches you this. Not everything needs to be clear, only present. You step aside as a woman carrying a basket moves past you, her pace steady, her attention forward. She does not look at you. Yet, she adjusts slightly to avoid contact, her movement precise without effort. You mirror that adjustment. It feels natural now. You pass another shop, this one quieter, its interior dim. A man sits near the entrance repairing a small object with careful attention. His movements are slow to set, as if time itself has softened within this space. You pause briefly, watching, then move on. The street bends slightly, and with it the light changes again. Shadows stretch differently, shaping the space in new ways. You follow the curve, your step steady. You feel something shift within you. Not a single emotion, but a quiet recognition. This city is not becoming more familiar because it is simple. It is becoming familiar because you are learning how to move within its complexity. You take a slow breath. The air carries many things. Some you recognize, some you do not. All of them part of the same place. You look ahead. The street continues, carrying with it new voices, new rhythms, new details waiting to be noticed. And you follow, your step steady, your understanding growing with each moment. You continue forward and the city begins to soften again, though not in quiet, not in stillness, but in a way that feels more contained. The streets remain active, yet the movement shifts towards smaller circles, more centered spaces where life unfolds not in passing but in repetition. You notice it first in the doorways. They remain open longer here. Not wide, but enough to suggest that what happens inside is closely tied to what happens outside. You pass one where voices overlap in a steady rhythm, not raised, not urgent, but constant. Conversation, instruction, reminder. You slow slightly, not stopping, just listening. You step closer to one such doorway and glance inside. The room is modest, arranged with care rather than abundance. A table stands near the center, its surface marked by daily use. A child sits nearby, focused on a small task, while a woman moves between different points in the room, her actions fluid, efficient. Her attention is everywhere. At once, a grounded historical insight is that women in early 19th century New York often managed both domestic responsibilities and income-generating activities, especially in working-class households. The boundary between home and work was rarely clear, and survival depended on maintaining both at once. You see that clearly here. The woman pauses briefly to adjust something near the hearth, then turns to check on the child, then returns to the table. Each movement connects to the next, forming a rhythm that does not break. You move on. Further along, another doorway reveals a different scene. Fabric hangs near the entrance, partially shielding the interior, though not completely. You catch glimpses of hands moving, of thread passing through cloth, of small, careful work carried out with quiet precision. You recognize it now, not just labor, but continuity. A rarely mentioned detail from personal records is that many women took in sewing, laundry, or small trade work to support their households, often working long hours within confined spaces. Their contributions were essential, though not always formally acknowledged. You continue walking. The street narrows slightly, but the sense of activity remains strong. You notice how many of these spaces function in layers. A front room for work or exchange, a back space for living, sometimes no clear separation at all. You pass a small shop where goods are arranged on a table just inside the entrance. The woman behind it greets a customer with a brief nod, her voice calm as she explains something about the items before her. The exchange is measured, not rushed, yet efficient. You pause just long enough to observe, then move on. There is a thoughtful perspective often raised in historical discussions that women's roles in urban economies were more significant than traditional narratives suggest, particularly in cities like New York, where informal labor filled many gaps left by formal structures. As you walk, you begin to sense how much of the city's stability rests on these unseen efforts. You pass a group gathered near a doorway, their conversation quiet but engaged. A woman holds a small bundle, adjusting it slightly as she speaks. Another listens, nodding, her expression attentive. The exchange feels personal, grounded in shared experience. You do not intrude. You continue. A child steps out into the street ahead, carrying a small container with careful focus. Their steps are slower than before, their attention fixed on not spilling its contents. You watch as they navigate the uneven ground, adjusting instinctively. They succeed, and continue on. You feel a brief sense of relief, though you are not directly involved. The city invites these small observations. These quiet moments, you notice how your own pace has changed again. Not slower, but more attuned. You are no longer only reacting to movement. You're anticipating it. You pass another doorway where a woman stands speaking to someone just inside. Her tone is calm, her posture steady, yet there is a firmness in her presence that suggests authority within this space. You realize that control here does not always come from position or title. It comes from responsibility, from consistency, from being the one who ensures that things continue. A curious anecdote found in some accounts is that boarding house keepers, many of whom were women, often managed not only the physical space but also the behaviour of those within it, setting expectations that allowed shared living to function. Their influence was subtle yet essential. You continue forward. The street bends slightly, revealing more of the same pattern. Doorways, windows, movement within contained spaces, each one different yet connected by a common rhythm. You hear a lullaby somewhere behind you, soft, barely audible. You turn slightly trying to locate it, but it fades before you can. The sound lingers in your awareness even as the street continues to move around you. You take a slow breath. The air feels familiar now, not because it has changed, but because you have. You look ahead. The street continues, carrying with it the same quiet strength you have begun to notice. And as you walk, you understand something that was not immediately visible before. The city does not hold itself together through grand structures alone. It relies on these smaller spaces, these steady hands, these repeated actions that taken together create something far larger than themselves. You take another step, then another, and you continue forward, moving within the rhythm that surrounds you. You move on, and the rhythm of the street shifts again, not toward quieter space, but toward something more scattered, more unpredictable in its motion. The figures around you grow smaller, not in number, but in stature. Children appear more frequently now, weaving through the same streets you have been learning to navigate. They move differently, quicker, less cautious, yet not careless. You notice it immediately. A boy runs past you, his steps light despite the uneven ground, his balance adjusting without effort. He turns sharply around a cart slipping through a narrow space that you would have avoided entirely. Another follows, their laughter rising briefly before dissolving into the general hum of the street. You pause for a moment watching them. There is a kind of freedom in their movement, not because the environment is easy, but because they have grown within it. A well-grounded understanding of this period is that many children in early 19th century New York took on responsibilities at a young age, contributing to household income through errands, small trades, or labour. Childhood in the modern sense was often shorter shaped more by necessity than by protection. You begin to see that clearly. A girl stands near the edge of the street holding a small basket filled with items you cannot immediately identify. She calls out softly as people pass, her voice steady, practiced, not pleading. Offering. A man pauses, briefly examines what she carries, then hands her a coin. The exchange is quick. She nods, adjusts the basket, and continues. You feel a shift in your understanding. This is not play. It is participation. You continue walking. A group of children gathers near a corner, their attention focused on a simple game drawn into the dirt. Lines scratched into the ground. Small objects moved carefully from one space to another. Their voices rise and fall with each move, excitement contained but present. You slow slightly, observing. One child hesitates, then makes a decision. The others react instantly, some with approval, others with mock protest. The moment passes, quickly replaced by the next. You move on. There is a lesser-known observation in historical accounts that urban children often developed strong social awareness, early learning to read situations, adapt quickly, and navigate complex environments without formal instruction. You recognize that skill in the way these children move, in how they respond to one another, in how they adjust to the constant flow around them. You pass a doorway where a boy sits on the step, his attention fixed on a small object in his hands. He turns it carefully, examining it from different angles. His focus is complete, shutting out the movement around him. For a moment you consider what he sees, then you continue. The street carries you forward. A cart moves slowly ahead and a young boy walks beside it, guiding the horse with quiet confidence. His posture is steady, his attention forward. He does not look like he's learning. He looks like he already knows. There is a thoughtful discussion among historians about whether such early responsibility fostered resilience or imposed burdens too soon. As you watch him, it feels difficult to separate the two. Strength and weight seem to exist together. You step aside. Their pass is giving him space. He nods slightly, then continues. You notice now how your own movement has adapted further. You no longer see children as separate from the structure of the city. They are part of it, moving within it, shaping it in small, constant ways. You hear a different sound now, not laughter, not work, but something in between. A group of older children gathers near a wall, their conversation quieter, more measured. They lean against the surface, their posture relaxed, yet attentive. Their eyes move constantly, observing the street, the people, the changes. You pass them without interruption. They notice you, but do not react. Their awareness feels different, more deliberate. You continue on. A small schoolroom appears ahead, its door open, revealing a space where children sit in rows, their attention directed toward a figure at the front. The sound of recitation carries outward voices, repeating words in unison, their rhythm steady, controlled. You pause briefly. The structure contrasts sharply with the street. Inside movement is limited, ordered. Outside it remains fluid. A curious detail from the period is that access to formal education was uneven, with many children receiving only limited instruction, if any at all. For some, this space represents opportunity. For others, it remains out of reach. You step away. The street resumes. A child runs past you again, this one carrying a small parcel with careful focus. Their pace is quick, yet controlled, their path chosen with precision. They disappear into the movement ahead, becoming part of it once more. You feel something shift within you again. Not surprise, but recognition. This city does not wait for anyone to grow into it. It expects you to begin where you are. You take a slow breath. The air feels familiar now, layered, active. You look ahead. The street continues, filled with movement that no longer feels entirely foreign. And as you walk, you understand something quietly. The city is not only built by those who lead or decide, it is shaped just as much by those who learn quickly, adapt early and move within it without hesitation. You take another step, then another. And you continue forward, your awareness, steady your place within the rhythm, becoming clearer with each passing moment. You continue forward and gradually the tone of the city shifts once more, not through movement or trade this time, but through something quieter, more intentional. The sounds do not disappear yet, they begin to organize themselves differently. Voices soften, footsteps slow, even the air feels as if it is being held more carefully. You notice the buildings first. They stand a little apart from the others, not by distance but by presence. Their entrances are more defined, their windows taller, sometimes marked by simple shapes that catch the light in a different way. You approach one without planning to. The door is open. Inside, the space feels still in a way you have not yet experienced in the city. Not empty, not silent, but ordered. Rows of benches stretch inward, each one aligned with the next. A few figures sit quietly, their posture composed, their attention directed toward the front, where a single voice speaks in a measured, steady tone. You step just inside. Inside, careful not to disturb. A widely recognized aspect of early 19th century New York is the strong presence of religious life, with churches and meeting houses playing central roles in shaping community behavior, charity efforts, and moral expectations. You see that influence here. Not as authority imposed, but as structure offered. The voice at the front continues calm, deliberate. You do not catch every word, yet the rhythm itself carries meaning. Reflection, guidance, a reminder of something beyond the immediate demands of the street. You stand for a moment, then step back outside. The city returns immediately, but something of that stillness lingers with you. You continue walking. Further along, you notice another gathering, this one less formal. People stand in a loose circle, their attention focused on a speaker who stands slightly elevated. His voice rises more than the one you heard inside, carrying outward with energy. His words move quickly, more urgent, more direct. A curious detail often noted in accounts of this period is the rise of revival meetings and public preaching where religious messages were delivered outside traditional spaces, reaching those who might not enter a church at all. You observe from the edge. Some listen closely, others more pass by without slowing. The city allows both. You move on. A small building ahead draws your attention not through size, but through activity. People enter and leave with purpose, their expressions focused. A sign hangs beside the door, though its meaning is not immediately clear. You step closer. Inside, figures sit at tables, writing, sorting, speaking in low tones. There is a sense of care here, of intention directed toward the others. There is a thoughtful perspective often discussed by scholars, that religious organizations in early New York often extended their role beyond worship, providing aid, education, and support to those in need, especially in rapidly growing urban areas. You begin to see that clearly. This is not only belief, it is action. You step back out. The street feels slightly different now. Not changed, but expanded. You pass a woman speaking quietly to another near the edge of the street. Their conversation is calm, their gestures small. One offers something, perhaps advice, perhaps reassurance. The other nods, her expression softening. You do not linger, but the moment stays with you. You continue forward. The buildings shift again, returning to the familiar pattern of shops and homes, yet the sense of reflection remains faintly present. You hear a bell ring in the distance, its sound clear, carrying over the layers of the city. You pause, just for a breath, then continue. A lesser-known observation from personal writings of the time is that many individuals turn to religious spaces not only for faith, but for a brief escape from the intensity of urban life, a place where the pace slowed, if only for a short while. You understand that now, not as escape, but as contrast. You notice how your own steps have softened slightly, your awareness less reactive, more centered. The city still moves around you, unchanged in its rhythm, yet you carry a small piece of stillness within it. You pass another doorway where a group gathers, their heads inclined toward one another, their voices low. The exchange feels private yet connected to something larger. You move on, the street bends gently, and with it the sound of the earlier gathering fades, replaced by the familiar blend of movement and work, yet something remains different. Subtle, but present. You take a slow breath. The air feels the same, and not the same. You look ahead. The city continues unfolding in layers that you are only beginning to understand. And as you walk, you realize something quietly. Amid all the motion, all the effort, all the noise, there are spaces that ask nothing of you except to pause, to listen, to breathe. You take another step, then another, and you continue forward, carrying that awareness with you as the city shifts once more around you. You continue walking, carrying that faint sense of stillness with you, though the city does not hold it for long. The rhythm shifts again, not gently this time, but with a kind of tension that you feel before you fully understand it. The street ahead grows louder, not in its usual layered way, but sharper, more focused. Voices rise in uneven bursts, not part of routine exchange, but something more reactive. You slow slightly, not stopping, just listening. A group gathers at the far end of the street, their movement less fluid than before. People stand closer together, their attention fixed on a single point you cannot yet see. The usual flow of carts and passers-by bends around them, creating a space that feels charged. You approach carefully. The air feels different here, tighter. You hear it then, the crackle, faint at first, then clearer. Fire. A well-established historical reality is that fires were a constant threat in early 19th century New York, where buildings made of wood open flames for cooking and heating, and limited firefighting infrastructure made even small sparks dangerous. You see it now. Smoke rises from a building ahead, not yet thick but steady. Figures move quickly, some carrying buckets, others shouting instructions that overlap and collide. The energy shifts from observation to action in an instant. You step back slightly, giving space. A line begins to form, people passing buckets from one to another in a rough sequence. The water moves faster than any single person could carry it alone, yet still feels insufficient against what is building. You watch as a man climbs partway up the side of the structure, his movements urgent, his grip uncertain. Others call out to him, their voices sharp with concern, though not panic. Not yet! A lesser-known detail from accounts of the time is that early firefighting efforts often relied heavily on community response, with organised fire companies forming later to bring more structure to these moments. What you are seeing now is that earlier stage, immediate, improvised, necessary. You feel the heat begin to reach you, not intense, but present, a reminder of how quickly things can change. You step further back as more people gather. Some move with purpose, joining the effort. Others stand at a distance, watching their expressions difficult to read, concern, curiosity, calculation. All of it at once. You notice how the city's rhythm has shifted completely. The steady flow you have grown used to is gone, replaced by something sharper, more fragmented. Movement becomes directional, focused on a single event that demands attention. You hear a crash, wood giving way. The sound is brief but heavy. A pause follows, then renewed motion. A thoughtful discussion among historians considers whether frequent exposure to such dangers created resilience or a kind of quiet acceptance among urban residents. As you stand here, it feels like both are present. People act quickly yet without visible shock, as if this possibility has always been understood. You continue to watch, not stepping closer, not turning away. The smoke thickens slightly, rising in uneven patterns carried by the shifting air. The building itself seems to hold for now, though the edges of its structure darken. You hear another sound, not from the fire, but from the crowd, raised voices again, though different from before. Tension spreads outward, not directly tied to the flames, but to something else, a disagreement, a question of responsibility, of action, of blame. You feel it ripple through the space. Subtle, but real. A curious observation found in some historical records is that fires in crowded cities could sometimes lead to unrest as fear, confusion, and existing tension surfaced all at once. The event becomes more than the fire itself. You see hints of that now, not fully formed, but present. You take another step back. The distance gives you a clearer view. The line of buckets continues, though unevenly. Some move faster than others, some spill, some arrive just in time. The effort is constant, relentless. You notice how your own breathing has changed again, slightly quicker, more aware. The air carries both smoke and the familiar sense of the city blending into something heavier. You wait, watching. Time feels different here. Not slower, but stretched. Each moment holding more weight. Eventually the movement begins to shift again. Not ending, but easing. The smoke lessens slightly. The urgency remains, but softens at the edges. The crowd begins to disperse, not all at once, but gradually, as if the city is remembering how to return to its usual rhythm. You take a slow breath. The tension releases, though not completely. You turn slightly. The street beyond the crowd still exists. Still moving, waiting. You begin to walk again. Your steps feel different now, more grounded, more aware of how quickly things can change. You pass others who are already returning to their routines. Their movements steady, their attention forward. The event becomes part of the day, absorbed into the larger flow. You understand something quietly. This city does not pause for long. Even in moments of danger, it shifts, adapts, continues. You take another step, then another, and you move forward, carrying with you the awareness that beneath the steady rhythm you have come to know there is always the possibility of sudden change. You move away from the lingering scent of smoke, and little by little the city begins to rearrange itself again. The streets widen. The ground feels firmer beneath your steps. The buildings stand with more space between them, their lines straighter, their surfaces less worn by constant contact. It is not a sudden change. It unfolds gradually. But you feel it. The air seems to carry more distance here. You notice fewer carts pressed tightly together, fewer voices overlapping at once. The movement continues, yet it spreads out, allowing each person a little more room to exist within it. You follow the street as it stretches forward, and slowly the details begin to shift. The buildings rise higher, their facades more deliberate. Windows are larger, more evenly spaced. Doors stand taller, framed with care rather than necessity. A well-documented pattern in early 19th century New York is that wealthier residents began moving northward away from the crowded lower districts, creating neighborhoods that reflected status through space, architecture, and distance from the busiest parts of the city. You are walking into that pattern now. You notice how your own steps adjust. Not because the ground demands it, but because the atmosphere does. There is less need to anticipate sudden obstacles, less urgency in avoiding contact. You move more freely, though still with awareness. A carriage passes you, its surface cleaner, its movement smoother than those you saw earlier. The horses are well kept, their pace steady, their presence quiet yet noticeable. The driver sits upright, guiding them with small controlled motions. You step aside, though, not as sharply as before. There is more room to do so. You continue. A row of houses stands ahead, each one distinct yet connected by a shared sense of order. Their entrances are set slightly back from the street, creating a small separation between public and private space. You pause briefly, observing. A woman steps out from one of the houses, her clothing carefully arranged, her posture composed. She moves with a calm assurance, her steps measured, her attention forward. She does not hurry. She does not need to. A lesser-known detail from personal accounts is that the design of these homes often included multiple floors with different levels assigned to different functions, and in some cases to different members of the household. Space itself became a marker of structure and hierarchy. You look at the building again, not just its exterior, but what it suggests. Inside life is likely arranged differently, more separated, more defined. You move on. A small garden appears beside one of the houses, its presence subtle but intentional. A few plants grow within it, their arrangement neat, controlled. The space feels quiet, almost removed from the surrounding street. You pause for a moment. The contrast is striking, not because it is grand, but because it is contained. You continue walking. The sounds of the city are still present, yet they feel more distant here. Conversations do not overlap as heavily. Footsteps do not press as closely together. Even the air seems to carry less weight. There is a thoughtful interpretation among historians that this movement of wealth northward did not simply reflect a desire for comfort, but also an attempt to create distance from the perceived disorder of more crowded districts. As you walk, you begin to understand that idea. Distance here is not only physical, it is social. You pass another house where a figure stands near the entrance, speaking quietly with someone just inside. Their tone is calm, their gestures small. The exchange feels controlled, contained within the space it occupies. You move on, a carriage stops ahead and a man steps down his movements. Unhurried, his clothing well maintained. He adjusts his coat slightly, then turns toward the house before him, ascending the steps with steady ease. You watch briefly, then continue. You notice how your own awareness shifts again, less focused on avoiding, more focused on observing. The city here invites a different kind of attention, not urgency, but detail. You pass a row of windows reflecting the light in soft patterns. The glass is clearer than what you saw earlier, less distorted, offering a more accurate view of what lies within. You catch glimpses of interior spaces, furniture arranged with intention, objects placed not only for use, but for appearance. You move on, the street continues to stretch ahead, its path more predictable, its surface more consistent. You feel your steps become more even, your pace more relaxed. Not slower, just less reactive. A curious observation from historical writings is that visitors to New York often remarked on the stark contrast between different parts of the cities, noting how quickly one could move from crowded, chaotic streets to more ordered, spacious neighborhoods. You have experienced that shift yourself, not all at once, but step by step. You take a slow breath. The air feels lighter here, not empty, but less crowded. You look ahead. The street continues, carrying with it the same sense of structure you have begun to notice. And as you walk, you understand something quietly. The city does not grow in a single direction. It expands in layers, each one shaped by different needs, different choices, different possibilities. You take another step, then another, and you continue forward, moving through a space where the rhythm of the city feels steadier, though no less alive. You continue along the broader street and gradually the sense of space begins to fill again, not with crowding but with a motion of a different kind. The city here stretches outward as much as it compresses inward, and you begin to notice how movement itself becomes one of its defining features. People are not only walking, they are travelling, crossing, connecting one part of the city to another. You feel it in the pace, in the direction, in the way attention shifts forward rather than outward. You walk alongside others whose steps carry a quiet urgency, not frantic but purposeful. They're going somewhere specific, and the path between here and there matters. You begin to notice the vehicles more clearly now, not just carts, but omnibuses, large enclosed moving steadily along the street, their presence shaping the flow around them. Horses pull them with controlled effort, their hooves striking the ground in a steady rhythm that echoes through the space. You step aside as one approaches. It does not rush, but it doesn't slow more than necessary either. An established fact of this era is that horse-drawn omnibuses became an important mode of transportation in early 19th century New York, allowing people to travel longer distances within the growing city more efficiently than on foot alone. You watch as it passes. Figures are visible through the windows seated close together, their bodies swaying slightly with the movement. Their expressions are neutral, their attention inward or forward. You consider what it must feel like inside, enclosed, in motion, then you continue. A man walks beside you for a moment, then turns sharply, crossing the street between two passing vehicles with a confidence that suggests experience. You pause briefly, allowing the space to clear before following. The street demands attention here, not only to the ground, but to timing. You cross. The movement feels different, more calculated. You reach the other side and continue on. A ferry bell sounds faintly in the distance, its tone clear, carrying across the space in a way that cuts through the layered noise. You turn slightly, catching a glimpse of water between buildings, a reminder that the city does not end at its streets. It connects outward, always. A lesser-known detail often mentioned in historical accounts is that ferries were essential to daily life, linking Manhattan to surrounding areas and allowing goods and people to move continuously across the waterways. You imagine the motion, the crossing, the shift from land to water and back again. Then you return your focus to the street. A line forms ahead, not static but slowly moving. People gather near a stopping point, waiting for the next omnibus. Their posture is patient though not idle. They adjust their stance shift, their weight glance forward as if measuring the distance. You approach the edge of the line, not joining, just observing. There is a quiet understanding among them, no words exchanged, yet each person knows when to move, when to wait. You step back, allowing the line to continue without you. You are still learning. A thoughtful interpretation from historians suggests that as transportation systems expanded, they began to shape not only how people moved, but how they experienced distance, making parts of the city feel closer or further depending on access. You feel that idea now. Distance is no longer only measured by steps. It is shaped by movement, by possibility. You continue walking. A carriage passes at a quicker pace, its wheels striking the ground with sharper rhythm. You step aside instinctively, your body reacting before your mind fully processes it. You have learned this. The city has taught you. You notice how your awareness now includes not only what is near, but what is approaching. You scan ahead, listen for patterns, adjust your path with increasing ease. You pass a narrow street where a smaller vehicle waits its driver, leaning slightly forward, watching for an opening. The moment arrives brief and precise, and he moves without hesitation. Everything here depends on timing, on attention, on the ability to act at the right moment. You continue. The ground beneath you feels more stable now, yet still carries the marks of constant use. Tracks overlap, impressions fade and reform the surface, never fully still. You hear voices again, not layered as before, but directional, calling out destination, announcing departures, guiding movement. You realize that the city speaks in different ways depending on where you stand. Here it speaks of motion, of connection, of the need to keep moving. A curious note found in some personal writings is, that newcomers often felt both excitement and fatigue when navigating the city's transportation, as the ability to travel further also introduced new complexities and decisions. You understand that feeling, not as conflict, but as balance. You take a slow breath. The air moves more freely here, carried by the open space and constant motion. You look ahead. The street continues stretching outward, linking one part of the city to another, in ways that are not always visible but always present. And as you walk, you understand something quietly. This city is not only built from places, it is built from the movement between them. You take another step, then another, and you continue forward, carried by the rhythm of a city that is always going somewhere. You continue along the street, carried by that steady current of movement, until the rhythm shifts once more, not through space this time, but through sound. The noise becomes sharper, more deliberate, less physical and more expressive. You hear it before you see it. The quick scratching of quills, the rustle of paper, voices speaking in measured tones, then rising briefly as if correcting or confirming something. You follow the sound. A doorway stands open ahead, and inside the activity is different from anything you have seen so far. Not slower, not calmer, but more contained, more focused on something that does not exist in physical form. Words. You step closer. Inside, several figures sit or stand around tables covered in sheets of paper. Ink stains mark the surfaces, small traces of repeated use. A man leans over a desk, writing quickly, his hand moving with practiced speed. Another reads aloud from a page, his voice steady, though not quiet. This is where the city speaks to itself. A broadly accepted understanding of this period is that newspapers and printed materials played a growing role in shaping public opinion in early 19th century New York, allowing information, rumor, and debate to circulate rapidly. You see that process here, not as abstraction, but as action. A sheet is passed from one person to another. Eyes scan it quickly. A word is changed, another added. The movement is constant yet precise. You remain near the doorway, careful not to interrupt. A lesser-known detail, often mentioned in historical accounts, is that many early newspapers were openly partisan, reflecting strong political positions rather than neutral reporting. The act of printing was not only about sharing information, but about shaping it. You notice the tone of the voices inside. Focused, occasionally sharp. A brief disagreement arises, then resolves, just as quickly replaced by continued work. The urgency here is different, not tied to physical labour, but to time, to relevance. You step back out into the street. The sounds follow you briefly, then blend again into the larger rhythm of the city. You continue walking. Further along, you pass a small stand where pamphlets are displayed, their pages thin, their print dense. A man stands beside them, offering copies to those who pass. Some accept, others decline without slowing. You pause, just for a moment. He extends one toward you. You take it. The paper feels light in your hand, the ink slightly raised against the surface. You glance at the words, though you do not read them fully. It is enough to feel their presence, to understand their role. You hand it back with a small nod. He returns the gesture. No words needed. There is a thoughtful observation among historians that the spread of printed material in cities like New York helped create a shared sense of public conversation, even among people who would never meet directly. You feel that now? The city is not only spoken aloud, it is written, circulated, repeated. You continue. A group stands nearby, engaged in discussion, each holding a small sheet. Their voices rise and fall as they reference what is written, their gestures pointing, emphasizing, questioning. You pass them slowly, catching fragments. Opinion, reaction, interpretation. The city thinks out loud here. You move on. A young boy runs past, carrying a bundle of papers under his arm. His steps are quick, his path direct. He does not slow, weaving through the movement with practiced ease. A curious anecdote recorded in some accounts is that newsboys became a familiar presence in the city, distributing papers across neighborhoods and helping information spread quickly through the streets. You watch him disappear into the distance, then continue. The buildings around you feel different again, less focused on production, more on exchange, not of goods, but of ideas. You notice how your own awareness shifts once more. You are not only observing what people do, but what they think, what they argue, what they believe. You pass another doorway where a man reads aloud to a small group gathered inside. Their attention is fixed on him, their expressions intent. The words carry outward, joining the sounds of the street, becoming part of the city's voice. You do not enter. You do not need to. You understand. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about how access to printed information influenced social and political engagement during this period, with some arguing it empowered broader participation, while others suggest it reinforced divisions. As you walk, you sense both possibilities. The words connect, but they also separate. You take a slow breath. The air feels different here, not lighter, but sharper, more defined. You look ahead. The street continues, carrying with it voices that are not only spoken but written, shared and reshaped with each passing moment. And as you move forward, you understand something quietly. This city is not only built from movement and labour, it is built from thought, from the constant exchange of ideas that shape what comes next. You take another step, then another, and you continue forward, moving through a place where words themselves become part of the landscape. You continue forward and the tone of the city begins to soften again, though not into quiet, not into rest, but into something more layered, more expressive in a different way. The work of the day does not end yet. It loosens its grip just enough to make room for something else. You notice it first in the light. It shifts slowly, not fading entirely but losing its sharpness. The edges of buildings soften. Shadows stretch longer, blending into one another rather than standing apart. The city does not stop, but it changes how it feels. You hear music again, clearer this time. Not distant, not fading. It comes from ahead, drawing your attention without demanding it. You follow. The street widens slightly, and a small crowd gathers near the entrance of a building that stands out through activity rather than design. People move in and out, their expressions lighter than what you have seen before. Some speak in low tones. Others laugh briefly, their voices rising above the steady background of the city. You approach carefully. Inside, the space opens into a room filled with sound. Music carries through it, steady and rhythmic, played by a small group positioned near one side. The notes are simple yet lively, filling the space without overwhelming it. You remain near the entrance, watching. A well-grounded historical understanding is that entertainment in early 19th century New York ranged from informal gatherings like this to more structured performances in theatres and lecture halls, offering moments of release from the demands of daily life. You see that release here? Not extravagant, but present. People stand in small groups, their posture more relaxed, their gestures less restrained. Conversations unfold more slowly, movements carry less urgency. You notice how different it feels, not because the city has changed, but because the purpose of the space has. You step back out into the street. The music follows you for a moment, then blends into the surrounding sounds. You continue walking. Further along, another kind of gathering draws your attention. A line forms outside a larger building, its entrance marked by the lanterns that glow softly as the light continues to fade. People wait with quiet anticipation, their movements contained but expectant. You pause, observing. A curious detail from accounts of the time is that theatres and public lectures were popular forms of entertainment, attracting audiences from different parts of the city, each bringing their own expectations to the experience. You watch as the line moves forward slowly. Tickets exchanged, doors opening. The interior remains hidden. Yet the anticipation is visible in the way people adjust their posture and the brief exchanges of conversation that pass between them. You move on. The street continues, carrying with it more signs of evening. Lanterns are lit one by one, their glow small but steady. They do not erase the darkness that gathers, but they shape it, creating pockets of light within it. You pass a tavern where voices rise more freely, laughter mixing with conversation in a way that feels less restrained than what you've heard before. The door remains open, the interior visible in fragments. Figures lean close together, their gestures animated, their attention focused inward. You pause briefly, not entering, just observing. A lesser-known observation from personal writings is that taverns often served as important social spaces where people gathered not only to drink but to exchange news, form connections, and briefly step outside the structure of daily routines. You understand that now. These spaces are not separate from the sit. They are part of how it continues. You move on. The street grows darker though not silent. The sounds shift again, becoming softer, more contained. Footsteps echo slightly more as the movement spreads out. Conversations lower in tone, carried more closely between individuals rather than outward. You notice how your own pace changes, not slower, but more deliberate. You are aware of the ground again, of the light of the spaces between people. You pass a small group gathered nearer a corner, their conversation quiet, their posture relaxed. One gestures towards something in the distance, and the others follow the motion with their eyes, then return to their discussion. You do not interrupt. You continue. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about how leisure in growing cities like New York reflected both opportunity and inequality, with access to certain forms of entertainment shaped by class and circumstance. As you walk, you sense that balance. Some spaces are open, others are not, yet all contribute to the rhythm of the city. You take a slow breath. The air feels cooler now, carrying fewer of the heavier scents from earlier in the day. It moves more freely, slipping between buildings, softening the edges of everything around you. You look ahead. The street continues, illuminated by scattered light filled with movement that no longer feels urgent but does not fully rest. And as you walk, you understand something quietly. Even in its moments of release, the city does not stop being itself. It simply shifts its rhythm. You take another step, then another, and you continue forward, moving through a New York that even in the evening remains alive with presence. You continue walking, and the evening settles more firmly around you, not as but as a gentler arrangement of sound and motion. The city does not sleep yet. It lowers its voice, allowing certain details to come forward that were harder to notice before. Your steps feel more deliberate now, not cautious, just aware. The light from the lantern stretches across the street in uneven shapes, illuminating parts of the ground, while leaving others in shadow. You begin to notice how people move through these patches of light and dark, adjusting instinctively, their bodies aligning with what they can see. A figure approaches from the opposite direction, carrying a lantern of his own. He walks at a steady pace, his gaze moving across the street, not searching for anything specific, but observing everything at once. You recognize the role even before you fully understand it. A watchman. A commonly accepted feature of early 19th century New York is the presence of night watchmen, individuals tasked with maintaining order, calling out the hours and watching for signs of trouble in a city that did not yet have a fully developed police system. He passes you with a brief nod. You return it. His presence does not stop the movement around him, but it shapes it. You continue forward. Further along, you notice another figure standing near the corner of a street, their posture upright, their attention fixed on the flow of people passing by. Unlike the watchman, they do not carry a lantern. Their presence is quieter, less defined, yet purposeful. You pass them some slowly. They glance toward you, then away. No words, just awareness. A lesser-known detail from historical accounts is that early systems of maintaining order often relied not only on official roles, but also on informal community observation, where residents kept watch over their surroundings in subtle, unspoken ways. You begin to see that here, not as control, but as presence. You turn down a narrower street where the light is less consistent, the shadows deeper. Your steps slow slightly, not out of fear, but because the space asks for it. The ground feels familiar beneath your feet, yet less visible, requiring more attention. You hear voices ahead, low, measured. You approach carefully. A small group stands near a doorway. Their conversation contains their gestures minimal. One of them speaks, the others listen, then respond in turn. The exchange feels structured, though not formal. You pass without interruption. The city at night does not invite unnecessary attention. You continue. A building ahead stands with its door open, revealing a dimly lit interior where a few figures sit at a table. Papers are spread before them, their discussion quiet but focused. Their posture suggests purpose, though not urgency. You pause briefly, then move on. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about how early forms of policing in cities like New York evolved from these mixed systems of official watchmen and informal oversight, gradually becoming more structured as the city expanded. You feel that transition here, not fully formed, but present. You pass another watchman, this one calling out the hour in a steady voice that carries across the street. The sound feels both practical and symbolic, marking time in a way that connects everyone who hears it. You listen, then continue. A curious observation from personal writings is that many residents found comfort in these calls, a reassurance that someone remained awake, attentive, present within the city's darkness. You understand that now, not as protection alone, but as continuity. The city continues, even here, even now. You notice how your own movement has changed again. Your steps are quieter, your awareness more focused. You listen more than you look. The sounds guide you. A door closes somewhere behind you. Footsteps echo briefly ahead. A distant voice rises, then fades. Each sound distinct, each one part to the whole. You pass a narrow alley, its interior almost entirely dark. You do not look into it for long. Some spaces are not meant to be read at a glance. You continue forward. The street opens slightly and the light returns in a more even pattern. You feel a small release of tension, though you had not fully noticed it before. You take a slow breath. The air feels cooler now. You turn to now quieter. You look ahead. The city stretches onward, its night form different from its day, yet no less alive. And as you walk, you understand something quietly. Order here is not absolute. It is maintained, adjusted, carried forward by those who move through it with attention and care. You take another step, then another, and you continue forward guided by the soft rhythm of a city that watches itself, even as it rests. You continue along the dimly lit street, and gradually, almost quietly, the city begins to open once more, not into brightness, but into breadth. The buildings step back slightly, the space between them widening just enough for you to feel the difference in how the air moves. Your steps remain steady. The rhythm you have learned carries you forward without effort now. You notice the structures first, larger, more deliberate. Their form suggests not just living or working, but something more ambitious. Storage, trade, planning on a scale that extends beyond the immediate street. You have reached the edges of the city's commercial core. A widely recognized feature of New York's development during this period is its rapid transformation into a central hub of trade and finance where warehouses, counting rooms, and shipping offices work together to support an expanding national economy. You see that network here, not fully visible, but implied in everything around you. A large building stands to your right, its doors closed for the night, yet its presence still active. You imagine the movement that filled it earlier. Goods arriving, records being kept, decisions being made that would shape journeys far beyond this place. You pause briefly, then continue. A faint sound reaches you, not close, but steady. The distant creak of rigging, the soft shift of water. The harbour is not far. Even here, its presence continues to shape the city. A lesser-known detail noted in some historical accounts is that merchants and traders often worked long into the evening reviewing shipments, calculating costs and planning future exchanges as the pace of trade left little room for delay. You imagine those moments, the quiet after activity, the continuation of work in a different form. You walk on. The street beneath your feet feels more solid here, more intentionally constructed, though still marked by use. The impressions left by wheels and footsteps remain, yet they feel less chaotic, more patterned. You pass a row of warehouses, their walls plain but substantial. Small openings near the top suggest storage within spaces designed to hold rather than display. You notice how little is visible, and yet how much is implied. You hear voices from a nearby building, low and measured. You slow slightly, catching fragments of conversation. Numbers, names, locations, the language of coordination rather than exchange. You do not linger. Some processes remain unseen. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about whether New York's rise as a commercial center was inevitable due to its location or driven by the aggressive expansion of its merchants and infrastructure. As you walk through this space, it feels as though both forces are at work, reinforcing each other in ways that cannot easily be separated. You continue forward. A carriage passes, carrying goods rather than passengers, its movement steady, its purpose clear. The driver guides it with practiced ease, his attention fixed on the path ahead. You step aside, allowing it to pass. Your body responds without hesitation. You have learned this. You notice now how your awareness extends beyond the immediate moment. You begin to anticipate not only movement but intention. You see where something is going before it arrives. The city has shaped that in you. You pass a narrow entrance where a small group stands in quiet discussion. Their postures compose, their voices low. One gestures toward the building behind them, then toward the street as if connecting 2 points in a larger plan. You move on. The street curves slightly, revealing a glimpse of the harbour once more. The water reflects faint light, its surface shifting gently, carrying with it the suggestion of distance. Beyond it, unseen paths extend outward. Trade routes, journeys, connections that reach far beyond what you can see. A curious note from some personal writings is that many residents of New York felt a constant awareness of the wider world, even if they never travelled far themselves, because the city brought that world to them through goods, news, and people. You feel that now? Standing here, looking out, then turning back, the city remains present, immediate. You continue walking. The buildings around you hold a quiet strength, their purpose clear even in stillness. They do not need to display what they contain, their function is understood. You take a slow breath. The air feels cooler here, carrying fewer of the heavier scents from earlier, replaced by something more open, more distant. You look ahead. The street continues, though the movement has thinned, the pace softened by the hour. And as you walk, you understand something quietly. This city is not only growing upward or outward, it is extending its reach, connecting itself to places far beyond its streets. You take another step, then another, and you continue forward, moving through a New York that is no longer just a place, but a center of something much larger. You continue forward, and gradually the city begins to soften, not by slowing completely, but by easing into a quieter arrangement of itself. The streets still stretch ahead, the buildings still hold their presence, yet everything feels as though it is settling into place for the night. Your steps grow slower, not from fatigue, but from a quiet understanding that there is no urgency left. The movement around you thins, though it never disappears entirely. A few figures pass at a distance, their footsteps measured, their voices low. The lantern light flickers, gently casting shapes that shift without demanding attention. You follow the street as it bends slightly, revealing a wider view of the harbour once more. The water reflects what little light remains, its surface calm in a way that contrasts with the constant motion you have felt throughout the day. You pause, just for a moment. There is a commonly accepted understanding that by the early 19th century, New York had already begun to establish itself as a leading American city, its growth driven by trade migration and ambition that reached beyond its immediate boundaries. You have felt that growth, not in numbers, but in movement, in sound, in the way the city carries itself. You step closer to the edge where land meets water. The air feels cooler here, softer, carrying fewer of the layered scents from the streets behind you. You take a slow breath, letting it settle, then release it. The harbour moves gently, its rhythm steady, almost quiet compared to everything you have experienced. Ships rest in place, their forms outlined against the dark, their presence calm but never still. There is a small, often overlooked detail in personal accounts that many people found moments like this near the water at night to be among the few times when the city felt less demanding, offering a brief sense of distance without requiring departure. You understand that now. You stand still, not observing, not analysing, just present. The sounds of the city continue behind you, softened by distance. A voice carries faintly, then fades. A cart moves somewhere unseen. The rhythm persists, though it no longer presses against you. You turn slightly, looking back toward the streets you have walked. They are still there, still active, still shaping themselves with each passing moment. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about what truly defined New York's rise during this period, whether it was its physical expansion, its economic growth, or the everyday experiences of those who lived within it. As you stand here, the answer feels less like a single cause and more like a convergence. All of it together, every step, every voice, every small action repeated again and again. You begin to walk once more, though your pace remains slow. The city does not need anything more from you now. You have moved through it, felt it, learned its rhythms. You pass a final stretch of street where the lanterns burn low, their light steady but subdued. The buildings stand quietly, their forms softened by shadow. The movement continues, though it no longer draws your attention in the same way. You take another breath. In, out. Your awareness shifts inward. The details of the day begin to settle, not disappearing but arranging themselves into something calmer, something easier to hold. The uneven streets, the crowded markets, the steady work, the layered voices. Each one still present, but quieter now. You continue walking through the destination no longer matters. Only the movement, only the feeling of being carried forward without effort. Your steps grow softer. Your breathing is steadier. The city remains around you, yet it no longer feels overwhelming. It feels distant, gentle, as if it has stepped back just enough to let you rest within it. You slow further. The street narrows again, though now it feels familiar, not confining. The shadows deepen, but they do not hide anything you need to see. You are no longer searching, you are simply moving. A calm observation drawn from reflective writings of the time suggests that even in the busiest cities, individuals could find moments of quiet by shifting their attention rather than their surroundings. You feel that now. The city has not changed. You have. You take one final look ahead. The path continues, though it no longer calls to you in the same way. You allow your steps to slow until they almost stop, then settle. The sounds fade slightly, not gone, but distant. You take a final breath and let it go slowly. The city rests around you, and you rest within it. Now as the night deepens and the edges of the city soften even further, you allow everything you have seen and felt to drift gently into the background. The harbour, the streets, the voices, the movement, all of it settles into a quiet memory, no longer sharp, no longer demanding. Your breathing remains slow, even unforced. There is nothing more you need to follow, nothing more you need to understand. The city continues as it always will, but it no longer asks anything of you. You have walked its paths, felt its rhythm, and now you can simply let it exist without holding on to it. The light fades further, becoming softer, more distant. The shapes around you blur slightly, not disappearing but easing into something less defined. The air feels calm, carrying only the faintest traces of what once filled it. You feel your body settle, your shoulders relax, your steps come to rest. And in this quiet moment, the city becomes something else. Not a place of motion, but a gentle presence, steady and distant, like a memory that no longer needs to be examined. You remain here, still, calm, at ease, and as everything softens around you, you allow yourself to drift gently into rest, carried not by the city's movement, but by its quiet lingering presence. Sweet dream. Dreams.